Hello, welcome to the National Hemp Association's In Conversation series. Today I have Ross and Anthony from Dart Bank. Welcome you both, and thank you for having this interview with me.
Thanks for having us.
So, can you tell us who Dart Bank is and what you guys do, and why did you decide to serve the cannabis industry?
Absolutely. Yeah. I'll give you, I guess, sort of the elevator speech for Dart Bank. And I'll give you the Asheville, North Carolina, where I live, elevator speech, because Anthony lives in Las Vegas and the elevators are a lot taller or higher. So I'll give you the Asheville version. But Dart Bank is headquartered in Mason, Michigan, which is in the same county as Lansing. It's about 10 miles south of Lansing, Michigan. We've been around since 1925, so 98 years. The name Dart comes from the Dart family that started the bank. We are still a privately owned bank, although much more broadly than the original family. There's a lot of employee ownership and ownership outside the family now, but still privately owned. We're a bank of some first. Interestingly enough, we were the first bank to make car loans. Makes some sense that it would be a bank in Michigan to do that, but one might think that it would be a bank in Detroit to have done that, but it was actually Dart Bank to make the first car loans. And we were the first bank in Michigan to get into the cannabis space as well. And we've done so really because as still a relatively small bank, we're about $1 billion in assets, which by all measures makes us still a community bank. But like a lot of small banks, we need to find niches where we feel like we can play a role, serve a business sector well, and really stand out in that industry. And cannabis felt like that kind of niche for us. And so again, we were the first to take on cannabis customers in Michigan, and we've expanded that to a national program. We now have combining hemp and cannabis customers, a little over 800 hemp and cannabis customers nationwide at this point. So it's been a really good niche for us.
Oh, wow. And from a, financial institution perspective, what was it like compliance and paperwork wise, or even research on how do I get started and, banking for the cannabis industry since it's federally illegal?
Yeah, it's a great question. And the first thing we did was go to our regulators and say, here's what we're considering. We want to make sure that you know what we're doing at every step, and let us know what you're comfortable with, what you're not comfortable with. And as you might imagine, the cannabis industry was new to them as well. So the regulators were trying to figure it out at the same time that we were. And so it was, sort of a collaborative effort. And the guidance we got was, look, we're going to let you set your own policies within reason. If you set a policy that we're not comfortable with, then we'll certainly tell you. But they let us set our policies. But the clear instruction was, if it's in your policy, you need to follow it or have a very good reason that you've made an exception to it. So the first step was really to make sure our regulators were comfortable with what we were doing. And then we also felt that the right thing to do was to engage a third-party compliance company to help us with compliance, because as you know, in hemp and cannabis, things differ from state to state,
Right.
and things change very rapidly. And so we felt like the prudent thing to do was to work with a third-party compliance company to help us both with front-end due diligence as we onboarded or as we onboard customers, and ongoing compliance. And that's worked well for us as well. We work with a company called Shield Compliance, and that's been a very good partnership for us. They are able to stay up to speed with what's happening state to state, and with legislation at the federal level. And we obviously track that as well. But there's so many different regulations in different states. It really is important to us to have a third party involved as well. Anthony, anything you'd add to that?
Ross, I think you said it great. We're at a really exciting time here at Dart Bank and the cannabis industry as well. Obviously, across the region, there is a lot of new states coming aboard, especially when it comes along the recreational cannabis side of the business.
Mhm.
Banking cannabis for many years now. We're excited to be at the front end of helping the industry, and we have recently, within the last 12 to 18 months, have expanded our footprint nationally to where we are really assisting cannabis companies and hemp companies nationwide. Where in the past we really had a central focus on Michigan, so it's a really exciting growth plan that we have to really expand our services now that we have the parameters in place, especially on the compliance piece, as Ross mentioned, to really deliver solutions in an industry that really needs just basic banking services, right?
Mhm.
And that I was with a large institution for many years, and I joined Dart Bank specifically for that reason. As far as where can we expand what we do for the greater good of the industry and the community, their employees, and that sort of thing. So that would be the only thing I would add to what Ross had mentioned.
So from a compliance standpoint, so how does Dart Bank and Shield work together? Is there a lot of cross-referencing or?
It's a great question. And there is. We have a dedicated compliance team in-house as well. We have a team of compliance folks who only work with hemp and cannabis customers. So we're not relying solely on Shield. And to be clear, Shield does not make any decisions for our bank. We make all our own decisions about what is a good fit, what's a good customer fit when we look at a prospect. But typically, Shield helps gather information from the prospect, and then they will also go out and find public information about the business, about the owners of the business, and then also look at up-to-date state regulations for the states where the business is operating. And so then they provide us with that information, and our compliance team and Anthony and Nicole Perry, who's our other teammate who is actually in Mason, Michigan, we'll look at it and say, yeah, this looks to be a good fit, or this gives us pause. Let's get clarification about it. So it's really a situation where Shield is a resource for information, and then we use that information to make decisions about the fit. And then ongoing, Shield helps us with ensuring that our customers' licenses are up to date. Any licenses that are required, depending on where the customer is in this industry, what sector they're in within the industry, to make sure that everything's up to date.
Well, that's great that you guys have a very detailed vetting process and extensive, and it goes through a chain, and to get third party verification, I would feel safe as a cannabis or hemp business banking with you guys because of that process.
And that's the thing we say most often, is we want our customers to feel safe. And we also say to each other with some frequency that if we don't get compliance right, nothing else matters.
No, absolutely correct.
And so that's why we pay close attention to making sure that we're getting the compliance piece right.
Yeah, and you guys working with regulators closely and being transparent, you have to build that trusting relationship.
Right.
So it starts from state, all the way down to the customer. Well, I know that Ross, you're out in North Carolina. Anthony, you're in Nevada. So when Nevada, became open to the cannabis legal market, how, can you maybe perhaps give me, the perspective, all these cannabis business coming like online? Was it very busy for your location, out in Nevada, or your branch in Nevada?
Sure. So, Nevada, I'm very proud to be in Nevada. I support the Western United States essentially for really all cannabis related entities and business needs. Nevada has actually a really good compliance program in place here at the state level. They do a really good job of holding cannabis businesses accountable to state regulations and things of that nature. Vegas or Las Vegas in specific, it's a little bit different animal because you have obviously a huge tourist presence here. You also have a growing local population. There's a very large influx of folks.
Oh, Anthony, I think you froze.
I couldn't tell if that was him or me. So
okay, maybe when he comes back online, we'll get back to that question.
okay.
But from the point where we talked about, cannabis and high THC cannabis and hemp businesses feeling comfortable banking with Dart Bank, can you tell us the obstacles or, that they do go through if your bank wasn't existing? Like, what are the obstacles that businesses go through to open an account?
Absolutely. And the obstacle first and foremost is there are just so few banks that are willing to bank hemp related businesses and cannabis related businesses. So that's the big obstacle. And then beyond that, I think some of the obstacles are the same as they are just in the general public. I mean, particularly regarding hemp, just these long held false paradigms around hemp. And just, this as well as we do, that there are just so many people in the general public that don't understand it. And I think that's true for a lot of banks as well. And I don't mean that as a criticism of other banks. It's just a fact. And what I've observed is there are a lot of banks that are doing really well in industries that they already know very well, are very comfortable with. And so some have just taken the approach of, we don't need it. We'll leave that to the Dart banks and the others that are interested in
all the legwork in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and again, not a criticism. It's just a different strategy. So I think the biggest obstacles are those issues. Just so few banks, and more education needed within the banking industry about what exactly hemp is.
Yeah, across the board, pretty much.
So, I think we've clearly removed one of those obstacles by being a bank that's willing to bank hemp and cannabis customers. The other ways we have tried to remove obstacles is to try to figure out product sets that work for the industry. Our basic product set for the hemp industry has been deposit accounts and very basic treasury services, online banking, remote deposit of checks with mobile deposit, using a cell phone, the ability to do wires and ACHs, those kind of basic services. But we continue to try to look for ways to expand those offerings. We are in discussion with a credit card processing company to bring them in-house so that our customers can have both their deposit account and their credit card processing merchant services all in one place, because that has historically been an obstacle as well. It's getting better. There are more options for hemp-related businesses to take credit cards, so that obstacle is less of one, but still there. And there aren't many banks that offer both deposits and merchant services together, and so we want to solve for that. And one of the biggest obstacles right now that, frankly, we haven't solved, but still look to try to figure out is credit.
Right.
Credit in the Hemp space is still very tight. There are a lot of reasons for that. It's some people refer to it as new industry. I tend to refer to it as a re-emerging industry.
You're right.
But a lot of the companies are nascent, don't have multiple years of track record, and then we also, as you know, had a couple of years of a tough run for the industry, with it being overgrown and COVID and all the things that were really headwinds for the industry. And so those have resulted for some businesses in historical numbers that make it challenging to extend credit. One of the ways we're trying to remove that obstacle, or at least mitigate it, is to look at SBA and USDA guaranteed loans for hemp-related businesses. I want to be careful with that because credit is still very tight, even with those options. But we will at least entertain it with SBA or USDA guarantees, because both of those entities have protocols for hemp-related businesses. For the cannabis industry, obviously USDA and SBA do not provide guarantees for a federally illegal product. So credit's even tougher there. But that's one of the biggest obstacles that we, along with other banks, are still struggling to figure out.
And well, from as I guess a customer perspective, when you onboard a new client, is there any testimonials you wanted to share from your customers? Like, is it a relief that they're able to bank with you and they have a place to go?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And there are things that we want to do better and fix in our process. And so we welcome feedback from our customers if there's something that felt like it wasn't as smooth as it could have been. But by and large, the feedback we get is, as you said, one of relief, and a really, I think, nice testimony to our bank. Not to oversell your audience on Dart Bank, but we recently transitioned 119 hemp-related businesses from the bank I worked with previously to Dart Bank. And we've had some of those, after going through the process, move other accounts to us as well from other banks. And so, we feel very good about that. We see that as a testimony to the process, and
Congratulations. That's
well,
great.
thank you. We're very excited about that. So the feedback is one of relief, one of feeling like they are with a bank that is committed to the industry, because we understand that there's a lot of distrust of the banking industry within the hemp industry and the cannabis industry. And we get it. I mean, we talk to people every week that come to us and say, hey, I was with XYZ Bank and everything was fine until it wasn't. And so we try to reassure them to say, look, our program is approved by our board of directors, has full support by our executive team. And we're in this business because we feel like it's a good niche for us. And so we want them to understand that when they work with Nicole or Anthony or me, they're not just with a hemp-friendly banker or a cannabis-friendly banker, they're with a hemp and cannabis-friendly bank. And that's important because, again, we talk to people also very frequently that say, hey, I had a great banker in my local branch, or somebody that understood my business and knew me, but then all of a sudden somebody in a compliance office picked up on the fact that it was hemp or cannabis, and the local person loses control. And that's one of the things we try to advise people as they're looking at banks. Make sure that you don't just have a hemp-friendly or cannabis-friendly banker, but that you have a bank that is hemp and cannabis-friendly.
Yeah. So it's, not on individual, bank representative basis. It's the bank as a whole.
Yeah, exactly.
It's quite important. Well, it's, with recent, banking failure news with SVB and, First Republic, um, and just like instability with, that market in general, how would, Dart Bank go through that kind of situation or not because you guys are smaller and more of a community base based on your assets?
Yeah, it's a good question, and one we, as you might imagine, are fielding with some regularity right now. And a couple of things about that. One, and not to be overly critical of SVB and the other banks that have failed, but I think what the general public needs to understand is that those banks were not operating as most banks operate within our country.
Like traditional banks?
Yes. And while they were traditional banks, their strategies really pushed the limits of risk. And with almost any bank failure, you can trace it back to credit problems. And in the case, for example, of Silicon Valley, they had a lot of exposure to high risk tech firms, a lot of venture, what should have been venture capital loans from something other than a traditional bank they were making. And really just less regard for risk than most banks have. And again, I don't mean that as a criticism as much as just a fact. And they also had some balance sheet concentrations that put them further at risk. They had a lot of money in bonds, and when interest rates went up rapidly, they got upside down and their bonds and had a high concentration in that. So they had both some credit issues and some balance sheet issues, the combination of which made it really unsustainable.
Right.
And then you add into the factor of people starting to get scared and pulling money, and they just didn't have the capital to hold that off. So when we have this discussion with customers, we reassure them on a few things. One, they're all the deposit accounts are covered up to $250,000. Most of our depositors have under $250,000, and so they're all completely covered. There are ways to set accounts up to extend that coverage to even more, and we work with them to do that as well. And then we also assure them that our fundamentals are solid. Our loan loss reserves to what are considered to be classified or troubled assets are 2.4 to 1. So, our troubled loans, which by the way, are relatively low as well. I mean, our delinquent loans right now are 0.71%. Anything under 1% is considered to be very healthy. And so not only are our delinquent loans well below what would be considered a healthy threshold, our reserves are very healthy as well. Again, we could double what would be considered troubled loans and still have the reserves to handle it. And so we want to make sure our customers understand that and understand that we're paying attention to it.
Right. Right. Yeah. And, I was just, reading up, articles, and I think even the FDIC like took accountable for that, to fail because, we weren't paying close attention.
Right. Yeah.
So, it's great that you guys are nationwide. And so since I'm out in Pennsylvania and I wanted to create a business account, as a hemp business, I would just visit dartbank.com and open an online account, or how would it work? Or is there like a brick and mortar bank? How would it work?
Yeah, we do have brick and mortar banks in Michigan. But it's really through technology. I mean, we know if we are going to have a nationwide program, we've got to have the technology offerings to make that work for the customer, and it does. If you call into our bank and want to open up an account, The person with whom you speak would immediately connect you with Anthony or Nicole Perry, whom I mentioned, or me, to have that discussion with you, talk about what our product offerings are, talk about the process, the front end due diligence and the ongoing compliance. And then we would do the due diligence process, sign off on the account as being a good fit, or the relationship being a good fit. And then all of the account opening documents are signed electronically. So we don't have to mail documents around. It's all done electronically. And then for hemp businesses, because it is less of a cash intensive business than it used to be, hemp businesses now have more options for receiving payments than they did 3 or 4 years ago. And they don't really, because of that, they don't really need a local branch. If they're taking checks, they can do mobile images of the checks. If they take a lot of checks, we can set them up with a scanner, and they can do batches of checks to make deposits that way. With the online banking, they can do ACHs and wire transfers, domestic wires, wire transfers. So really anything they need to do on a day-to-day basis, they can do with those products electronically. And really if they take a little bit of cash in, then most of them will just use it for petty cash. The other option is if they take a little more cash and they're comfortable keeping around in petty cash, they'll convert it to a money order and do a mobile deposit of that, just like they would with a check. So, again, we've got customers all over the country that will never have walk into a branch in Michigan, but will bank with us for years without any need to walk into a branch. And then for the cannabis related businesses that we bank, if they are still taking cash, we partner with a few cash courier and vault services companies to pick the cash up and then take it to their servicing centers, and we give the customers credit until that money's validated. So
okay, I only asked, and this is just like also from a personal experience. I had a business that involved working with hemp textiles, and my business partner was out in Colorado. And in order to even just have my name on the business account, I had to fly to Colorado just to sign papers. And then
wow. When was this? How many years ago was this?
I want to say 2018.
Okay.
2018,
yeah, I think
2018.
Yeah, my guess is, and again, I don't want to speak for all banks, but my guess is that would be a rarity now. Early on, right after the Farm Bill, those of us that were working in the industry, we're all just trying to figure out how to do it. So I think most banks that are in the industry have gotten to the point, aside from some that have been kind of late entries into it, have gotten to the point where we understand what really needs to be done in order to run a safe and compliant program. When at first we probably were overly compliant. The analogy I use is probably every bank in the country has restaurants within their book of business, but they're not doing the health inspections. And so I've tried to view hemp the same way. We need to understand our customers first and foremost, so we know how to help them. But we don't need to be the police for the industry. We just need to make sure that our customers are doing the right things for the bodies that regulate them. But everything's done electronically now.
That's wonderful. So it's great that, Dart Bank has, an intimate team. It's you, Anthony, and Nicole, if anyone wanted to open a cannabis or hemp business account, which, I think that would bring me peace of mind, because you have someone walking through, and if I need to call and, and ask another question, I would know that it's going to be one of you three.
Yeah.
Consistently.
And the other thing I would tell you is all three of us are certified cannabis banking professionals. And, it's the word cannabis, but it also means hemp. To be a certified cannabis banking professional, it includes understanding of both the cannabis industry and the hemp industry. And we felt like that was important. If we're going to serve the industry, we need to understand it. And we continue to self-educate to make sure that we can. And then we also have a dedicated specialty banking operations team that only works with hemp and cannabis customers, so that if you call in, need something immediately, then you got a team of folks that only works with customers in the industry that help you.
Wow, that's incredible. And was this something that, when you were speaking to regulars and, during this time where you guys decided, yes, we're going to serve, the cannabis industry, was like, okay, well, we need dedicated departments for this?
It kind of evolved.
Okay.
As you might imagine, it kind of evolved, but it is clear to us that we do need dedicated people, not only for sales like Anthony and Nicole and me, but in the back room as well, for compliance officers and with customer service folks that you call in and you got a team of folks that's all they do. So Anthony, anything you'd add to that? Welcome back.
Yeah, welcome back.
My internet just went down for the completely wrong time. No, to what you guys were saying, I'm very proud that we have a dedicated cannabis and hemp banking team. I obviously run into some of the few competing banks out there, and what I've found is there's some banks that will they'll entertain cannabis and hemp customers. What separates us is we actually welcome cannabis and cannabis and hemp customers. We don't just do it, we want it, right? We know what you do, we love what you do, we support what you do, we understand what you do, as opposed to some other institutions will like, okay, well, we'll do it, but like, we don't really have the infrastructure to really support you holistically as a partner, right? And that's where I really see, and our team really sees herself as really a partner to help guide and shepherd through some of the financial obstacles that you're going to face in this industry while the current regulations and laws are still in place. So it's going to look a little different, right? But that's where we're there to guide you to make sure that you can sleep at night knowing that you have a bank that's going to not send you a letter tomorrow and say, we found out what you're doing and we're going to
close your account. Yep.
And all it's an open book with us, right? So that would be the only thing I would add to that. So
I think just Dart Bank treats cannabis and hemp businesses like businesses.
Yep.
We're not doing anything illicit or, so I think, I definitely appreciate that.
It's great fun. I really love working in the hemp and cannabis sector. And as I've told a lot of people, I've been in banking for 37 years and banked hemp and cannabis for the last 4 years now. And it's the most fun I've ever had. I mean, it's just really fascinating industries and people, the variety of people that we meet, and just the creativity and everybody trying to help move the industry forward. Jeff wailing as much as anybody, but just it's just a fun industry to be in. And of course, as you know, there are a lot of challenges, but in some ways those challenges are part of what make it fun. Just trying to
make it
work
fun
with other people.
And that's the thing, coming to this industry, we want to be seen as businesses. Like, our industry shouldn't be as any different from any other.
Right.
Speaking of, does anyone from your team or Dart Bake in general have been following the Safe Baking Act that's been reintroduced? I don't know for how many times.
I think it's 8 now, but I may have lost count. We do, and I've been humbled by predictions enough that I probably shouldn't make them. So,
right.
I really I can't tell where that's going. And if you look at the federal level, there just seem to be headwinds on both sides of the aisle. There's some on the left that don't want to do safe banking as a standalone. They want it more of a comprehensive overall cannabis package. And then there's some on the right. And I don't mean that to stereotype fully, because there are folks across the aisle on this issue, like any. But then there's some on the right that just don't want hemp at all. I originally thought safe banking would pass in the early years, but I've stopped making predictions on that one.
Yeah.
Anthony, how about you?
Anthony, do you have any opinion on the reintroduction of this?
We found it quite extensively. I've actually given updates to some community events and things around kind of my 2 cents. To Ross's point, it's really tough to predict. Where the legislation is going to fall, when, and how that's going to go. The good thing is we see it as a positive, really, at both trajectories, right? Both vectors. We're here to continue to serve the industry regardless, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
There's going to be lots of positives that come with the passing of that legislation. There's going to be a lot of change for the industry in general. You're gonna see a lot of folks that maybe have been preparing for something like that kind of open up the doors and start helping the industry, which is a great thing, right? More options for the industry, the better. Our goal is to continue to support the industry regardless of what legislation kind of takes place, right? And that's why I feel good that we've done all that back end work. We've done all that, work with our regulators from a compliance standpoint. When we passed our audits, we get audited quite frequently. We hopefully will be an industry leader if and when that does take place, regardless of other factors, right? We are, of course, continuing to monitor it and take a look at it, and not only that legislation, any other cannabis and hemp legislation that's kind of out there that we're kind of keeping an eye on. But I guess we'll see.
Yeah, and the one thing that I don't think will happen, and I think most people have come to this conclusion, is that I don't think there's going to be just this rush of banks off the sidelines with the passage of safe banking, because that is, legislation is part of the reason, or one of the reasons, that some banks are not in hemp and cannabis, but it's not the only reason. And so I think Anthony's right. There will be some banks that are probably already in preparation stages that will jump in, but I don't think it's just going to open up floodgates of banks jumping in.
Right. Well, thank you so much. And can you please remind our listeners and viewers where they can go to learn more about Dart Bank?
Anthony?
Sure. Dart.bank is our website, or dartbank.com, whatever channel you want to view. We're on the specialty banking team, which does focuses really essentially on cannabis banking. My email is aarmato@dartbank.com if you'd like to shoot me an email with any follow-up questions. I can also be reached directly on my cell phone at 725-222-9893 if anybody would like to reach out to me directly via phone. And would be happy to set up a meeting with any cannabis or hemp customers that are looking for a safe and dependable and quite frankly a really good place to hold their money and get some really good service from the Dart Bank team on the specialty banking side, as well as our folks extended in our Mason office that support us on the back end.
And my email is just rsloan, RSLOAN at dartbank.com, and my cell phone is the best place to reach me as well. It's 828-243-2385.
Well, thank you so much, Ross and Anthony, for joining me in the In Conversation With interview. Yeah, so to our followers and viewers, thank you so much for watching, and tune in to our next installment.
Great. Thanks, Anna. Please give my best to Jeff.
Of course. Have a good
All right.
one.
You too. Bye.